Welcome back to the Real News Network, coming to you from Washington, D.C. We're with Robert Borosage, who's the co-founder and co-director of Campaign for America's Future. All right, final segment of the interview. Let's talk about, you represent a progressive organization with an overtly progressive agenda, and your position with the Obama administration has been to encourage everything positive, and you're critical when you don't agree with things, but anyway, you got the Obama administration here you're trying to push. And over here, you have the right, who's reorganized under Rush Limbaugh and Dick Cheney.
God forbid.
The
new leadership is the old leadership. The new ideas are the old ideas.
But they're clever. They have enough media clout to very quickly present themselves again. Are you at all afraid that you're going to be caught once again at the next election and the next election, hoping and not having had your hopes delivered on from a Democratic administration, again caught in this thing that the alternative looks so much worse? And how does one break out of this paradigm?
Well, I think you do have to fight the battle of ideas with the right. I don't think they've disappeared. The Gingrich strategy and the Cheney strategy, which they've put out over this last period, is to lay down a marker on failure, right? Cheney, Obama's weakened our terrorist policy. If there's an attack, it's his fault. Gingrich, Obama's a socialist, and he's spending all this money and wasting it. If the economy's bad a year from now, it's his fault. And so they're trying to get themselves in a position so next fall, if unemployment is still high, which it will be, they can run and say, see, we told you we spent trillions of dollars and nothing happened, and this economy's still a mess. Got to go back to the old ideas. We have to contest that space. You can't let them get away with that. The old ideas are what drove us into this cliff. We're not going to go back there. At the same time, and it's important, what Gingrich has in his head is 1994. Clinton comes in 92. He's got some, at least hopes of doing some liberal things. And the Republicans beat the hell out of him on health care, among other things. He splits the party over NAFTA. Clinton splits the party over NAFTA. And in 1994, Gingrich does a contract with America, and they sweep the House. And we then fight a rearguard action from then on against the right wing that's controlling the Congress. We can't let that happen again, so we have to take this seriously. On the other hand, I do think that Democrats, we're going to go through a set of big debates on big reforms, and a lot of our effort's going to be trying to corral conservative Democrats, particularly in the Senate, to support that agenda. And the ones that are constantly against that agenda, I think we have to be serious about challenging them in primaries, or at least sending them. You don't have to do them all. You have to be careful about this and strategic about it. But there's no question when Ned Lamont challenged Joe Lieberman in Connecticut and beat him in the Democratic Party, it gave Democrats their voice on Iraq. Before that, they were talking about body armor. After that, they started talking about getting the troops out of Iraq, and it made a huge difference in that election. And we have to see next year whether we're in that same position. And everybody should know that. The legislators should know that. They should concentrate their minds. That there's not a free pass here. Just because the right's out there lurking in the woods.
So are you preparing for that now?
I think there are groups that are preparing for it, and we'll be part of that.
So this, just so everybody understands, you're talking about a campaign like with Lieberman to defeat conservative Democrats that are obstructing progressive legislation.
Yeah, to challenge not one or two carefully selected. We don't want to risk Senate seats, but we have to be at least prepared to have that threat be real, and we have to be prepared to challenge them. I actually don't even think you have to beat anybody. You have to be able to do a serious challenge. The right wing showed us how to do this. When they would challenge Republican legislators, and they would generally lose those primaries. But it concentrated the mind of every Republican who did not want to be challenged in a primary, and it had an effect at consolidating their discipline. Well, we've got real reforms with real stakes for real people that are coming forward before this Senate and this Congress, and we've got a set of senators that are in the way. I think we have to make it clear to them that it's not a free pass.
How concerned are you that what we talked about in banking and in auto and in foreign policy, that this sort of timid halfway measures, halfway reforms, are likely to fail and hand this failure to the Republicans to run on, and that this lack of a bolder, more assertive progressive vision actually leads to a defeat?
Well, I would argue that the timidity is likely to fail. But I don't think it's a closed process. I think we have to see this as Roosevelt. We have to see this as we'll try and then we'll try again and we'll keep experimenting. And what we have to do, that's why contesting the battle of ideas with the right is so important. What we have to do is to make it clear that we can't go back to a set of ideas that, untrammeled markets, top-end tax cuts, the kind of verities of market fundamentalism that drove us off the cliffs and into this hole. And getting out of it's going to be hard, and we're making it up as we go along, and we'll get some things wrong. And when we get them wrong, we're going to have to correct them, but we have to stay in this experimental mode and make that argument to the American people. If you only got one shot at this apple, we will get it wrong. We will get some things wrong. When Roosevelt came in, I think Roosevelt got the banks right. He took them all over, had a banking holiday, reorganized them, set them up, and then went on. He got the stimulus wrong. He had a very good timid stimulus, and then he shut down, and then he tried to balance the budget and drove the economy back into a recession. But what he created with the American people was a sense of trust and a sense that he cared. He was trying. If he got it wrong, he'd keep trying until he got it right. Now, this is a very different time. He was very much deeper into the Depression when he was elected than Obama, and so he had, in some sense, a disadvantage. The crisis was worse, but an advantage. Everybody knew how bad it was. And so it's not clear that the public will have that much patience with this administration, but I think that's our task. I think our task is to make people understand the reality, that this is unprecedented and it's going to be really hard to get this right. And we have to try and keep pushing until we get it right. I think the kind of notion that you and I have the right answers, even though I'm very critical of this administration, I think this is a debate and a discussion, and we're all going to learn as we go along, trying to figure out what works here.
I don't think there's any question of that. This is a very complicated process and unprecedented process. And maybe that's part of the problem with the policies so far, is they seem so much geared to try to get back to where things were. And personally, I don't think there's any going back.
Yeah, I don't either. But what's interesting is we have a president who says that, right? We have a president who says we can't go back to the old economy. We can't go back to the economy borrowing $2 billion a day from abroad. We can't go back to an economy that has this expanded and bloated financial.
We don't see the policies that are.
But the first thing is to lay the stakes out, and then we'll get the policies that get us there.
Is there a point going ahead 4 years, 8 years? Does this always for you stay within the Democratic Party, or are we also into a new paradigm? Like if, for example, the Republicans really become a hard right rump in the South, almost a regional party, is there now open, at least as a threat, that maybe if the Democrats can't live up to the moment, that now maybe is the time for something else?
Well, I think our system is really biased to a two-party system. And I think, Ralph Nader showed how easy it is to lead you into the wilderness and really have no effect and take a great leader and make him look silly. My sense is the way American politics changes.
Some people are saying some of the stuff he predicted wasn't so far off.
He's a brilliant man. That's not the point. The political strategy was nuts. My sense is the way America changes is citizen movements outside of electoral politics transform opinion. The union movement, the women's movement, the civil rights movement. They call America, the environmental movement. They call America, and they change the kind of the center of opinion, and they make a sea change in where we are as a country.
But
and then that takes
changed more than the Democratic Party does?
That takes expression in the Democratic Party. So the other piece of that is we've always argued for to build a progressive majority, not a Democratic majority, and that means challenging conservative Democrats in primaries, seeing if we can build more and more progressives so that we expand the progressive majority in the Congress, not a Democratic majority. And this crisis, where you've got a lot of legislators on both sides of the aisle, but particularly on the Democratic side, who don't get it, I don't believe, who don't understand that the old ideas aren't going to work and don't understand the kind of pain that's going on in their own constituents, I think it sets them up for these kinds of challenges in very conservative districts. I think there's a lot of conservative Southern congressmen from the Democratic Party who don't really understand how populist the temper is in their own districts and could be challenged from progressive challengers. And we've got to try to probe that. We've got to try to build that. I think the more Democrats have a dominant position, the more there should be an argument within the Democratic Party between progressives trying to push to make this party, a much more progressive thing. But behind that has got to be a citizens movements outside of politics and inside politics that are changing opinion. I think that's really important. If you look at what's happening now that's lacking, in my view, it's not so much Obama's leadership. It's not even really the leadership in the Congress. We don't have, amazingly, we don't have an angry movement, an aggressive movement of people who are upset at what's happening to their lives. They've had their savings destroyed, they've had jobs taken away, they've had homes that they're losing, and there's a kind of sense of resignation, a sense of hoping that the president will do the right thing. We need a movement that will change Washington and scare Washington. That's what happened to Roosevelt. That's why we got Social Security.
Well, the real news is going on the road, and we're looking for that movement.
Good.
And
Good.
next stop is Detroit, and we're actually going to set up a production unit in Detroit. And in Detroit, if you ain't angry, I don't know when anyone's getting angry. So we're figuring Detroit, you got to be it, and we're coming there. Thanks very much for joining us. And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.